Welcome to Life on Purpose, where we talk all things health, wellness, and living your life on your terms. I'm your host, Brandy Eilert. I'm a holistic health and wellness coach and creator of Brandy Eilert Wellness, where I help women with adrenal fatigue and chronic stress live a more holistic, purpose-filled life. You can find my content and services at wellness360coach.com/Brandy-Eilert. You can also find me at Brandy Eilert Holistic Wellness Coach on Facebook or Brandy Eilert Wellness Coach on Instagram. Now get ready to learn how to really live life on purpose. What would it mean to you to be able to create the life that you really want? What would it mean to be truly content, happy, fulfilled? And would it shock you to know that you actually have more control over your life than you may think? And that it all boils down to controlling your thoughts, planting the seeds of positivity and watering the hell out of them. Today's guest, Rob Temple, has a unique perspective on mindset, confidence, and overcoming your mental blocks. Rob is a stage hypnotist obsessed with human psychology and what makes us think, act, feel, and behave the way that we do. He's not a psychologist, a scientist, a life coach, or an academic. He hasn't got a degree, hasn't written a single book, and doesn't treat clients. But over an 18-plus year career as an entertainer, he's hypnotized over 20,000 plus people around the world and has uncovered the real in-the-field magic behind our thoughts, emotions, and mindset. Rob is on a mission to help regular people just like him understand how a single idea, planted like a seed in our mind, can grow and flourish into something powerful to change your life and become the very best version of yourself. It is my pleasure to share with you this interview with Rob Temple. All right, Rob, thank you so much for coming on to chat today a little bit about mindset. I know that a lot of us right now feel like we don't have much control over a lot, but the one thing that we do have the most control over is our thoughts and our mind, and kind of creating a life that we want to live. And you have a really unique perspective on that. You're not a scientist or a life coach or an author or a psychologist or anything like that. You are actually a stage hypnotist. So you have this really unique perspective on people's thoughts and people's minds. And you said yourself that you're a little bit obsessed with like the psychology of the mind. Can you speak a little bit about kind of your background and how this became something that you became really interested in? And because I think, going backwards and starting from the beginning is really important for people to understand, like how you got to be kind of this mindset guy.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. So I am 33 at this point at the time of recording this. And for since I was like 16, I've been performing all over the world as a stage hypnotist. I knew what I wanted to do really early on in life, but that wasn't very easy. As a kid, I was like horrendously shy, terrified of everything, didn't make friends very easily. Wasn't bullied or anything. Like I didn't have a rough time, but at the same time, I wasn't very comfortable with myself and all of that stuff. When I was 4, I saw a magician, and I was blown away by this kid's magician who could have an empty box one minute and it had a rabbit in the next, and could make handkerchiefs disappear from one side of the room and appear somewhere else. This was like incredible. And so I instantly, as a 4-year-old, knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to be that man with the bright orange trousers on who could make things appear and disappear. That was all I knew magic to be as a 4-year-old. And my parents bought me a magic set. I think most people had like a magic kit at some point and probably played with it for like an hour, and then it got thrown away or put to one side when the rocking horse came out or whatever. And I wasn't. I was obsessed with it. I was glued to it. I was addicted to wanting to do magic. And so I would show my parents tricks. My dad would come in from like a 12-hour day in the office, and instantly when he's trying to eat his dinner, I'm like thrusting things in his face saying, "Watch this, Dad." And that never went away. As I grew up and got older, that's what I knew I was going to do from being the age of 4. And then when I was 9, I had the chance to do my first ever magic show. And it was for a group of, we call them brownies. So they're like the ones before Girl Guides. I don't know if it's the same over there or not, but basically 9-year-old girls before they become Girl Guides. And so I'm about 9, they're about 9. There's about 30 of them. And I get to go and do this little show. I got paid with a magic book, which I've still got. And my stepmom organized it because she was friends with the woman that ran the thing. And I was all set up. I had my little table with all the tricks on it, and I was good to go. And walked out, picked up the first one, and froze to the spot. Like you wouldn't imagine. Like stage fright on a next level. Couldn't speak, couldn't say anything, didn't know what to say. I'd practiced. I knew how to do the tricks, just froze. And I paused for like a minute of awkwardness. And then in the end, I ended up just like, all I can describe it as has been like an auctioneer, like demonstrating things. Like I was just like, open the box, close the box. Now there's a thing in it. And like the worst demonstration of magic you've ever seen.
So there was no like flair behind it at all. It was just kind of going through the motions.
Yeah. And my stepmom stood there and she stepped in and she did all the talking and all the routines and the script and everything while I was just doing the tricks. So I ran to the car afterwards and just burst into tears. And I thought, as a 9-year-old, I now thought I've done this for the last 5 years. And I thought the thing I was going to do for the rest of my life, I can't do it. Like
because of fear.
The path I'd mapped out. Turns out I haven't got what it takes. I can't present. I can't perform. That was it. And that's a lot for a 9-year-old. It's a lot for anyone to take in, but it's a lot for a 9-year-old.
Pretty crushing when you're 9, right?
So I went back and that was it. Now, fast forward a whole bunch of time, and we can talk about that story and some of that journey if you like, but fast forward a whole bunch of time to 16. I had made a transition. I was obviously kept up magic, but I'd also made a transition into stage hypnosis, as you said. And I decided to leave magic as a hobby and be a hypnotist. That's what I wanted to do. So for about 2 years, I did magic and hypnosis side by side. Like one night I'd do a magic gig. The next night I'd do a stage hypnosis gig. And the reason is I was obsessed with how our brains work. I was obsessed with how I could go out in front of a room full of people I've never met before with nothing but a microphone and some funny props, get people on stage and then turn them into the wildest characters you've ever seen, and like get rid of all their inhibitions and all of their fears and all of their apprehensions. Kind of a reflection of what I'd spent the last few years doing in my own life.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, that's, it seems like you were creating in people what you needed created in you, right? At that 9-year-old Rob.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I became obsessed with how our brains work, because not only do I love performing my show, but we get total strangers out of an audience and let them, again, all of their inhibitions disappear. They have all the confidence in the world, which is, I mean, you know, if they think they're Madonna for 3 minutes, why wouldn't they have all the confidence in the world? Like, you know, we don't think Madonna has any fears, do we? Although I'm sure she does, but it's easy to think that she doesn't, and therefore they don't. And so I just love creating these amazing transformations on stage. And of course that bleeds, as I found out by accident, that bleeds into the real world off stage, as we all have to battle stuff every day. We all have to use you have to use our minds in order to achieve the things we didn't think we could.
Right. And you have to do it intentionally on purpose, because I feel like a lot of the time, you know, we kind of muddle through not really knowing what we're doing, what we want. We know we want something different, but how do you plant that seed? You know, I want a fulfilling life. I want to be happy. I want confidence. But what is it? You know, people aren't just born that way. Maybe some people are, but I mean, I don't know very many people who are that confident to just not care what anybody thinks, or, you know, be held back by it. So what is it that helps you weed through that riffraff and plant those seeds that kind of help you flourish the life that you want to be truly happy? Because our inhibitions do hold us back so much from, and our fears do, from creating what we really want. Because what you did, I feel like, is pretty brave. At 16, you knew what you wanted, and it was very different than what anybody else probably had thought for you. I mean, most of us come out saying we're going to be doctors or lawyers or what have you, these really respectable, big, heavy jobs, but you knew, and you always knew what you wanted, and it was very different. How do you weed out all that riffraff and say, okay, this is what I want. I don't care what you think. I mean, how do people do that? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'll come back to that in a second. First of all, I want to address that other point about the fact that like nobody's really born really confident and full of bravado, apart from that small select handful. And even then I'm cynical. I think everybody's born really ordinary. Everybody's born more or less the same. Obviously there's nature, nurture and all that stuff. And everyone is born with a different sort of genetic makeup, and all of that affects your mindset. But for the most part, you are born and then everything in the world happens to you and you have no control over it. As a baby, you get picked up when your parents need to pick you up and put down again when your parents need to put you down. And that's kind of it. Other than crying for attention, we really have no control over that. And what we definitely have no control over is everything we absorb and everything we hear and everything that happens around us and to us. So for example, if you, like, babies don't understand English yet, but like they know emotion and they know thought. So like if you are trying to make a baby laugh, the baby will typically laugh. If you shout at the baby's going to cry. It understands emotion because we just do on a core level. And so what that means is that even though we don't understand all the words that we're hearing when we're babies, we do understand that so much more than you would imagine. And so everything that happens from the minute you're born starts to build a picture of who you are. It starts to build a picture of how you see the world. And therefore it starts to build a picture of, most importantly, what your place within that world is. And unfortunately, there's a whole load of well-meaning people who just say the wrong things, do the wrong things, and carry on with their sort of mundane, ordinary lives around you that continue to push humdrum into your life and continue to like program you to want to be, quotes, normal and do normal things and, you know, just get by. And how difficult the world is and how much problems there are and why there's another recession and like all of this stuff that is just programmed into you from being a kid and growing up through your teens and at the time where you are most suggestible and most sort of vulnerable to that, I suppose. And so that builds a picture of who you are. In terms of how you start to make a change to that, well, the first thing as you said, is to be intentional about it and to just know that it's got to happen. So as a 9-year-old, I knew I can't do the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life unless I can change something about it. So that's the first big thing. It would have been really easy for me as a 9-year-old to say, well, I can't do that, so I'll just have to work in a shop or serve coffee or something. I have to do something else, not the thing I want to do. And the only difference between saying, well, I can't do that and, well, I'm going to do that is finding a method, finding some sort of pivot point, finding some sort of pressure point where you can just make a turn in the road and then follow down that different path. So for me personally, I said, right, well, I now know that I currently am not able, and I'm sure it wasn't this conscious when I was 9, but I'm currently not able, this is me reverse engineering it, I'm currently not able to go and perform in front of a small group of 30 people who are the same age as me, about 9. So I'm going to have to do something else. I'm going to have to figure out what that is. What can I do? Well, I know that I can show my dad a magic trick, or I can show my mum a magic trick. At a push, I can show my slightly more distant relatives, like my Uncle Tony, I can show him a magic trick. But that's about my limit. That's the evidence I've got. Because everything you do in the world is based on evidence. Everything we believe is based on evidence. You don't convict somebody of a crime unless you've got some kind of evidence that's made you believe that he's done it. And so for everything you do in life, start to look for the evidence of what you can do and what you are good at and what the world does have in store for you and what is possible. So for me, I said, okay, great. The first starting point is to be able to show one person who I know really well a trick. The next step is, can I show that same magic trick to somebody who maybe they introduce me to? So I'm at a wedding and my Uncle Tony brings over his friend Derek and says, oh, this is Derek, show Derek that trick. And I show Derek the trick. That's a bit more difficult because that requires a bit more effort. That requires a step outside of my comfort zone. And eventually you might end up showing 5 people who you don't know that same magic trick. And I think everything in life is just about looking for evidence to support the small amounts you can do, even if it's not the big picture dream of what you one day want it to be. That's okay, because it's not one day yet. You can always like find the small thing that you want to be able to do for now that takes you kind of a step closer towards what that big picture thing is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like baby steps. And you know, in my coaching practice with a lot of my coaching clients, we do like, you know, step out of your comfort zone a little bit, you know, because like you said, you're on this trajectory and you're so afraid that you can't get off of it, but you really can, but it's really just baby steps, doing
Right.
one little thing to kind of get you off that track. And eventually, you know, your trajectory changes without you really even knowing it. So
Yeah.
you taking that little bit, you know, little bit of strangers one at a time, and it can grow bigger and bigger and bigger from there. Because it blows my mind a little bit to think that you were a shy kid. You know, the little bit that I've talked to you in the YouTube videos that I've watched of your shows, and it's crazy to think that somebody as shy as you claim to be can do what you do. But it's a matter of taking those steps and pushing yourself a little bit further and further and further. And I
Right. I
really
mean,
love them.
I think one of the things people, so that with confidence particularly, there's this real thing where I think it's a bit of a myth in the personal development, self-improvement world, where people say, well, how do you get confident? And people say, well, you have to fake it till you make it, and you have to just do it, and people will think you're confident. And if people think you're confident when you are, well, that's true, but it's really hard to do. Like it's almost,
Yeah.
it's almost impractically not possible.
Right.
And so, for example, if somebody's got a morbid fear of spiders, and like you say, well, the way to cure that is just to hold a spider. Well, there's some argument to suggest that's true, but getting them to do it's hard. If you're frightened of heights, jumping out of a plane is easier. It's, you know, is more difficult than it's harder said than done. Easier said than done. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so what I realized is that if this is much later in life, but I realized that if you don't have the confidence to do something yet, what you actually need isn't confidence, it's courage to have a go at something smaller.
Yeah.
And so what I needed was the courage, a small amount of courage, to be able to go and show one person that trick. And this applies to everything. If it's job interviews, dating, making friends, you know, whatever it's going to be, what you need is the courage to do that small little bit. Like if you're frightened of heights and somebody says, I want you to climb up this ladder, and it's a rickety wooden ladder against a wall, you might be terrified of being 10 rungs up the ladder, but you're okay being one rung up the ladder. Everyone's okay with that. That's only half a foot off the floor. So you climb up one rung of the ladder. That takes no effort whatsoever. Now, with a little bit more courage, you can probably make it 2 rungs up the ladder. Most people could do that. You can't go any further, though, because that's as far as you can go within your context of what doesn't frighten you. And as soon as you're 2 rungs up the ladder, eventually you'll become confident being 2 rungs up the ladder. And so now you need to find a bit more courage to go another rung up. But, and here's where it's misleading, you don't need more courage. You just need the same amount of courage, because you're now, your sort of new normal is higher up the ladder. Like you're now totally comfortable being where you are. So what you need is the same bit of courage that got you from the first rung to the second rung to get you from the second rung to the third rung, and just keep rinsing and repeating. And so what that requires is not to take the thing that you can't do and go full force at it, but it's why you can take the small version of that and go full force at that. The thing that's almost not frightening at all. And then when that becomes your new normal, we're going to keep hearing this word new normal, but when that becomes your new normal, you can then say, okay, great. Well, this is normal now. This isn't frightening at all. So now I can take the same courage that got me here and use it to get me to the next bit. And I think if you look at life that way, you can literally take any step forward that you want.
Right. And I find it really fascinating. I was thinking about this while you were talking. You know, I've heard so many people say, like within their careers or status in life or whatever it is, well, I'm not where I want to be. And it's really funny to me because I will look at them and their life and think, wow, you know, you have a really beautiful, great life, like your career. Anybody would love to be doing what you're doing or anything like that. But we don't look at it like that. We tend to think we need more and more and more and more. And maybe we do. And maybe that's our standard. But it's really fascinating to me, like what your mind can tell you about your own life and your own being. And that's kind of what you're talking about planting those seeds of positivity and whatnot, because it's really hard to be positive sometimes, especially if you're not naturally a positive person. If you don't look at your life positively or your career positively or your situation positively, how do you switch that? How do you switch that on and feel just a little bit better?
I think the first thing, and this is hard, but the first thing that people just have to accept is that the thoughts you're thinking right now and the feelings that you're feeling right now and the emotions you're going through right now are not who you are, right? They're not you. It's just a thing you're experiencing right now. So for example, if I'm driving from here to my friend's house, I have to drive through a tunnel. So for about 2 miles, I'm in a tunnel that goes under a river. But I don't live in a tunnel. I just happen to be passing through a tunnel at the time. The tunnel is happening to me in order for me to get from where I am to where I want to be. And so if you think about it like that, what's effectively happening for most of the time is, first of all, our thoughts tend to more or less happen to us. We have loads of choice over them, but only if we exercise the right to use it. In that, most of the time, our brain is just collecting information. The only thing our brain can really do is ask questions and then find answers. So is that a table? That's a table. Is that a bottle of water? That's a bottle of water. What day? Oh, it's Tuesday. Okay, great. That's pretty much all our brains can really do is and ask questions and then find the answers to those questions. Sometimes it gets the answers wrong. Sometimes the answers are opinions. Sometimes it's subjective, all of that. And then all it can do is piece those bits of information together. As a hypnotist, I work with the unconscious mind. So if you think about the conscious and the unconscious mind is the bit that's gathering all this data, this research and stuff all the time, millions of bits of information every day. And then the conscious mind is the voice in your head, the thoughts that you think of as, well, that's me. I need to go to the shop. I must remember to get some potatoes. That voice, that is your conscious brain. And all your unconscious brain's doing is collecting all this information, then handing it over to the conscious brain in a way that makes sense to you at that moment, based on your current frame of reference, based on the current beliefs that you seem to hold, in a way that makes sense. And the problem is your unconscious mind isn't really qualified to do it, because all it can do is it's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle, but there's more puzzle pieces being thrown in all the time, and it does make a mess. And so what that means is that if you currently feel like generally you're not a very positive person, or generally you're not a very confident person, or generally you're not a very happy person, generally speaking, that's actually just not a phase, that's the wrong word, but it's like a moment that you're going through. It's a thing that's happening to you based on stuff that you're allowing yourself to react to. So the first big realization that people have to make is that that's a really transient phase, because nobody's happy all of the time. Nobody's like on top of the world all of the time. Like the happiest people in the world have sad days and have difficult times and have struggles. So the first thing to acknowledge is that stuff is happening to you and upon you and around you, and it's something you're going through. And if you realize that, rather than it being like a permanent state of mind, that's a really good first step.
That's good. It's kind of like weeding out the riffraff, because all it is information that you're taking in. And if you can reframe that information, or even weed out some of it, you're picking through the unnecessary stuff. And we have a lot of unnecessary stuff, if you think about it. And typically that's the stuff that's making us unhappy. So if you can consciously like pick through that and say, all right, that's not worth my time. That's not worth my time. Typically you can simplify, break it down a little bit and not feel so heavy about whatever it is in your life that you're feeling unhappy about.
100%. And if you realize that the thoughts that are passing through your mind right now are not your beliefs, they're not your core thing. Like a lot of the time, if you're having an argument with somebody and you're desperate to win the argument, you'll say things you fundamentally don't believe when you realize you're wrong, just to continue trying to be right. Like just as irrational humans, we'll say, no, it really is this. And suddenly a penny drops when you go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm wrong here. I'm completely wrong. But that's okay. I'm going to say stuff I don't really believe because it's going to get me out of this. We do that all the time.
I feel like there's so much of that going on right now in general on a global level.
Right. And we do it all the time in our heads, right? We have this inner conflict. But the problem is, as humans, we're stubborn, we have cognitive dissonance, we don't like to be wrong, etc. And so generally speaking, it's much easier for us to ignore the evidence that suggests that we might be wrong. And therefore, we continue to be glum or down or lacking confidence or not good enough or whatever the thing is that we're currently feeling. And so that's really hard. But you've got to realize, like I said, it's just a passing thing. That's what you currently believe. And therefore, if you can start to realize that thought that says something like, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, I'm unhappy, is actually not necessarily how you really feel, then again, you can start to question it. I think you should be as cynical of your own thoughts as you are if like some greasy salesperson comes up and tries to like sell you, I don't know, a new roof or double glazing or something. I think you should be as cynical of your own thoughts sometimes as you are of them. When you see those negative thoughts that says, I can't do that or I'm not good enough, you have to just question it and go, whoa, like what's the evidence that says that is true or isn't true? And then if I start to dig into that evidence a little bit and actually kind of look at your thoughts from an outside perspective, as if you were having a conversation with somebody, if somebody said something to you and you didn't quite believe them, you would question that, right? You'd say, but no, because surely, and then you'd look for them for some sort of validation of what they've just said. You can do that to yourself as well.
I love that. I love the idea of kind of having this conversation with yourself and questioning your own ideas about yourself, because I'm probably just as bad as anybody. I mean, I have questioned like my own thoughts. Gosh, I mean, I've probably the last 4 years, I question everything. Like, what am I doing? Am I supposed to be doing this? Am I doing this because of this? You know, these perfectionist tendencies kind of hold me back from this. But I love that, being able to kind of go inside and say, okay, are you doing this and thinking this because of A, B, or C? And questioning your own thoughts. We don't do it because it's hard.
Right.
You kind of touched on that a little bit earlier of, you know, we can question all these things that we're thinking and doing, but we tend not to, because who wants to face the fact that maybe we've been lying to ourselves for our whole lives? You know, if you're not a confident person or you feel crummy all the time about your life or your situation, who wants to like turn that around and think that you've been creating this yourself?
Right. And we're really good at it usually, but only for questioning the positive things, which is crazy. But like generally when things are going quite well, we tend to overthink. So there's a fine balance between questioning everything you think and overthinking, right? You have to be careful you don't stray into the realm of overthinking. But typically, as long as you focus this on the negative stuff and the stuff that other people would like, if you were coaching your friend, because we're all great at coaching a friend. Your friend comes to you and says, oh, but this is crap and this is rubbish. You're really good generally at saying, no, because what about this? And what about she said? And like pushing them to find the truth. So you have to do it for yourself. But I think what we tend to do is we tend to question the good stuff. So when stuff's going well, we tend to say, but I'm probably going to fall up at the end, trip up at the end of this, and that's probably not going to work. And then that's going to, because this lucky streak won't go on forever. So we tend to overthink by focusing on questioning all of the good stuff, and we just never dare to question the negative stuff, the stuff that is just so ingrained in us, because we don't have to, because being in a negative place feels safe. Like if I'm not very confident, then I'm not going to go for it. If I'm not very happy, well, my happiness can't come to an end. Like the bottom's a safe place to be. So if you feel like you're at the bottom in certain places, you feel like there's nothing to question, but actually that's where all of the digging needs to happen.
And there's nothing to lose if you stay in that safe space. There's nothing to lose. It feels a little more terrifying when you're in that good space and it feels like maybe you have everything to lose. But if you can reframe that idea and think that you could keep going or maintain at least, but that's, like you said, that's a lot harder to do.
Right.
It's
a
conscious decision.
The good news is that one affects the other. So if things are going well in certain areas of your life, if you focus on the stuff that you find hard and the stuff that you don't feel good enough at and the stuff you don't feel like is going very well, and you can turn that around, that will accelerate and prop up the stuff that's going really well. Like all you're doing is adding to the good stuff. So one does affect the other for sure.
And I always find that it's a lot easier to be in that space and maintain that space if you also consciously choose to surround yourself with people who don't try to bring that down or bring you down or bring you out of it too. So not only are you having this conversation with yourself in your own mind, but making sure you're surrounding yourself with people who can also prop you up and keep pushing you as well. So, not only are there those inside forces, but also the outside forces too. Because as much as we want to think that we can have control over our thoughts, it makes it even more difficult to reframe and control those things if you constantly have those outside forces like just trying to crush you and crush you.
And one of the things is people try and be helpful and accidentally are unhelpful. So for example, if my girlfriend came home from work one day and said, oh, I had such an argument with XYZ person, I like they were so out of line and they did this and they did that, or she's been to a family event and comes home and says, oh, my sister, she's done this and she's done this. Most people will dig into that and say, well, tell me more. Oh, what a horrible thing to do. And like they'll jump on your side without any evidence other than the anecdotal stuff that you're getting, and basically continue and perpetuate that negative feeling. What I tend to do is say, oh, that's rubbish. Tell you what though, and just turn it around. What do you want for dinner? Like completely just change the subject. It's not about like, as long as I don't care or because I don't believe that thing happened, or that I don't I'm not like empathy. I haven't got empathy for the fact that she's had a rough experience of something, but like all I want to do is just not let her dwell on it, because the minute that's off, that passing negativity can just go away. So a lot of people are trying to be supportive by coach. Well, tell me more. I'm trying to be a counselor when they're not one. And just having them talk about it, and then this, and then this, and then that leads to this negative path of overthinking stuff. So the quicker you get somebody out of one of those sort of funks, the better. So I think like most people really need to do that kind of thing.
So it's almost as easy to plant a seed of negativity and kind of dwell on that as it is to plant a seed of positivity that you can kind of grow and nurture and kind of pull yourself out of that.
Right. And going down is easier than going up. So like walking up a flight of stairs is easier than falling down a flight of stairs. Sorry, falling down a flight of stairs is easier than walking up a flight of stairs, right? Because gravity does that for us. So I think it's easy for things to go wrong. It's easy for us to like get into that bad state of mind. And going up is hard. You have to try to go up. You don't have to try very hard to go down. So because you have to try, that just by default is harder. And therefore you have to focus more on doing that, because the world is planting negative stuff for us all the time, everywhere we turn, every time you open a newspaper.
Constantly. And I think that's why it's so much more difficult these days to create that life that you want and to create the happiness that you want and the calmness. Because in general, I don't feel like people are striving for something that's unattainable. For most people, they're striving for contentment. They're striving to be happy and content and fulfilled in their life. And it's really difficult when you're being thrown something every day. And so I think, one of the things that I really work on my clients with is making sure that you are really conscious about what you're consuming. Everything. News, what you read, the people in your life and everything, because that is going to make it a lot easier to create the life and contentment and fulfillment that you want if you are surrounding yourself and consuming the things that are going to feed that positive thought, that positive goal, or whatever, you kind of have in mind. But yeah, it's hard. And that's why people will choose, to kind of stay stuck rather than doing the work to get out of it and knowing that they have control over their own life. Because I feel like we don't really realize that. We don't really feel that we actually have control. But you touched on that earlier, that it's things that are happening to you that you have complete control over. It's just information.
Totally. Yeah, and you have complete control over how you react, how you engage, or otherwise. I mean, and some of it sounds to most people like a really eccentric thing to do. But if you take total control over the inputs into your life, I mean, you could if you wanted to. So at the extreme, don't do this, but at the extreme, you could be single, lock yourself in a room, shut the door, have food delivered to your house, just open the door to get food in, close the door again, throw the television out the window, and just carry on with your life, and you have no awareness of what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, that's not a very acceptable way to live. So you need to, not very happy one either. You need to find a way, like the fine balance of being completely in control of the input into your life so that you can really focus on what you output. And I think that's really important. So one of the things that I do is don't have social media on my phone. So I can't end up just casually scrolling through stuff on Facebook and reading news stories I didn't want to see and all that stuff. Actually, I do have Instagram, but I'm very good at using it as a megaphone, and I don't tend to look at that much stuff from other people. I tend to like show people what I'm up to and then ignore everything else mostly. Don't read the newspapers, don't watch the news on the television. I absorb the bits of news that I sort of want to hear just to keep my finger on the pulse, because the argument could be, well, how do you know what's going on in the world? Well, it's really hard not to. If you don't watch the news, you still know what's going on in the world, because everybody tells you their opinion on it.
Sure.
The news is just somebody's opinion. Let's remember that. It's not facts. It's presented through a particular light. Like, there's no disputing that. So if you're watching news for facts like a documentary, then that's not going to work. And even documentaries are presented from somebody's opinion, right? So I think the first thing to do is take a really strong level of control over what input you have. So I don't engage in anybody else's stuff before 11 in the morning. Like, so I just have a rule in my life. I don't do calls before 11 a.m. I don't do anything before 11 a.m. It's blocked out in my diary. I don't look at my phone before 11 a.m. The landline house phone in the phone is the phone that people would ring me, like my dad or something, in an emergency, rather than my mobile. And that's left to one side, because that way nothing can input, like physically cannot, unless somebody comes to the front door and knocks on the door, nobody can have any input into my life other than me and my girlfriend and our guinea pig. And that's it. And that means that on a morning I can spend all of that time just completely focused on all of the output that I want to do. And that's a really empowering thing to do. But it sounds like a wild idea to most people to like shut down that much. And if you like work in an office, you can still do that. You just can't limit the sort of input from the people immediately around you. But you can still choose not to listen to the news. You can still choose not to absorb stuff from social media.
You know, that does sound, like you said, a little eccentric, but it's not impossible. And I think your relationships and life must be a lot more calm probably than a lot of ours. You know, because you're not being infiltrated upon
right
a million times a day before noon.
Right. And you know, and it's just out of cough there. It is completely calm, because all I'm focused on is what I want to do that day and how I want to, well, like I said, the output that I want to put out. But it's really easy to do.
Right. And you're choosing to limit the information that you allow in, because there's only so much information that we can take. And that's kind of like my realm of coaching that I do is, you know, people with chronic stress. And typically the chronic stress comes from too much information. You know, you're allowing too much into your life. And so intentionally choosing what you allow in and when is super important. Right. It's massively important. And I love that. And I love, because it creates room. It creates space for creativity. It creates space for calm. It creates space for all the things that you need to take care of you and what you're doing. And you have complete control over it, but we don't remember that. We forget that on a daily basis because it's easy and it becomes a habit. But if you can create a habit that's opposite of that, which you have, you know, you can have such a calmer life.
So normal life is to be completely bombarded by everybody else's agenda the minute you get out of bed. Like, even going back, I don't think anybody does this now, but even going back to like when people had the radio came on when their alarm clock went off. So the alarm clock goes off and the radio plays and it's the news. Like the minute in fact, before you're even awake, like your eyes might not even be open yet, and you're hearing about something that's happened in the center of town and this amazing things, this horrendous things happened and burglaries and murders and all this other stuff. That's just the first thing, like when we think about it like that, the first thing you hear when you wake up is all of this stuff that is, even if it's not bad, it's at least other people's agendas. Or like you wake up in the middle of the night and you just pick up your phone and check an email. And suddenly, if that's a bad email or it's about, a problem at work or something, suddenly that's now your problem. And it's your problem in the middle of the night that you have to deal with. And nobody needs to live that way. Nobody needs to live that way. There's obviously exceptions, like if you're on call and all of those things, but that's still because you're still in work mode, right? But when you're in non-work mode, you shouldn't be living like that.
No, it's too much. It's absolutely too much. And it's not a shock to me that there are so many nervous system issues and stress issues and depression issues and all of this stuff, because we are not built to be consuming that much information and, like you said, other people's agendas all the time. It doesn't leave room for you to consider your own thoughts, going back to what we talked about before, your own thoughts and your own ideas, and having this conversation with yourself about where you want to go and where you need to be, and then creating the life that you want. Right. It's just too much.
I think if you had 2 jugs of colored sand, and you've got a jug of red sand and a jug of white sand, and you've got a big jug of red sand, and you've got a tiny jug of white sand, and you pour them both into a big jar, there's going to be more red sand than there is white sand. Makes sense. Yeah. But if we consider that to be bad news and good news, that's what we do in our lives all day long. We just absorb bad news all day long because it's all around us and other people's influences. And we can't help but drown out the good stuff.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's like standing on the beach in the middle of a hurricane. I mean, you're not going to be able to hear the birds chirping. It's just, it's too much. So how has this, like what you do and seeing what planting this positivity in people's minds and whatnot, like as a hypnotist, how has that created in you the life that you want? Because going back, this was hard for you to create this life that you wanted, but you were brave, and you ended up coming out of it on the other side, and you've created this life for yourself that's very positive and very intentional. How have you seen like your life transform personally?
It sounds like it probably sounds like a fairly selfish life, because I've always just said, well, if I don't want to do something, I won't do it. And for the most part, that's generally true. But I genuinely believe that if you're generally quite selfish and choose to live life completely on your terms and only do the stuff you want to do, you can like help other people so much better. Like the advice you can give other people is better. The time you've got for other people is better. The stuff you can contribute to is better. So I've always just been focused. That's my rule. I have a rule that's, and it sounds like a childish rule to a grown up, but like, if I don't want to do something, I generally won't do it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the amount of like headspace, and because I run 3 businesses and a tour show and like all of that, but I have so much headspace to be able to focus on myself and positivity and happiness and all of that stuff. Because if you're not taking on loads of stuff you don't want to do, and you're not living by somebody else's rules, and you're not living the way society thinks you're supposed to live, then I think that does give you a lot of clarity and a lot of calm. And so I've been lucky. I never suffered from anxiety or stress or any of those things, really. I'm just a very laid back person, but I think that comes from knowing that fundamentally my days look the way I want them to look. I do the things I want to do. I don't do the things I don't want to do. Sure, I get a cold every now and then, a headache now and then, but like apart from that, it's generally good. And having that level of control over everything means that you can feel. It's funny, control is an odd thing. When you have that much control over something, it all feels very relaxed and very chilled. Like, but I have tight control.
You know what I find too is that you saying that, like being able to live your life on your terms, also gives other people permission to do the same. Because when somebody looks at you and they say, oh my gosh, he just does what he wants and he doesn't care what everybody else wants him to do, it kind of gives you permission then as the outsider to say, oh, well, maybe I can do that too. And that's what I find really fascinating about people. And I use the word bravery. It's not really brave to be who you are, but I feel like people do feel like it is, but it gives other people permission to do the same. And totally. I respect that to no end.
And permission is such a valuable thing. Like everybody just needs, like you can do anything if you've got the permission to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the permission is probably the most valuable commodity we can have in our brains. It's just to know it's absolutely okay to do it.
Yeah. And a lot of the times it's just your own permission.
Totally. There's nobody else can give you permission to leave your job and start a business, or to go for that job interview or whatever, or to go on a date or whatever it's going to be. Like nobody else can give you that permission. You've got to do it yourself.
Well, I love that. I love that. I mean, you have such great insight, and I think it's something that we all need to hear. But so where can people find you if they want to find all of your brilliant ideas and mindset information and goals and all that good stuff? Where can people locate you?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things. I have a podcast called Success Unlocked. So it alternates. One week it's me, and then the next week it's me interviewing a guest. Then it's me, then me with a guest and that stuff.
Yeah.
So you can go and find that at successunlocked.com. And also I've put together a little pack of like free worksheets and exercises and resources. There's 6 of them. They're kind of designed to tackle the bits of mindset and personality I think are most important to live a really balanced life. So happiness and confidence and limiting beliefs and all that stuff. So if you want to go and grab that, you can just go to successunlocked.com/purpose, and you'll be able to download it and get involved and just start reprogramming your mind to think the way you want to think.
That's fantastic. Rob, it's been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with the audience all of your great tidbits. So I hope you guys stay safe over there. I know it's just as crazy over where you are as it is where I am. And again, I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.